He is the heartbeat of the team. He's the engine room in that team. Without him, the team just doesn't tick like it usually does. Never put a foot wrong in terms of getting out of the group, which I don't think is spoken about enough for a team like Switzerland. There isn't really any other national side of the similar stature, even your Swedens or teams like that do it as consistently as Switzerland have. So he makes decisions where you think, this is crazy, what is he doing? And then, it comes off for him. So yeah, he's definitely one of those that splits opinion.
Welcome to Make Football Great Again, your definitive 48-nation roadmap to the 2026 World Cup. I'm Harry Brent, and over the coming weeks and months, we're going to be profiling every single nation heading to the tournament this summer to find out more about the countries, the cultures, the fans, the teams, and hopefully we'll be uncovering a few little secrets and stories along the way too. As for today, we're covering Switzerland, and I'm delighted to say I'm joined by Craig King, a native Scot, but a man who knows Swiss football like the back of his hand, having covered the game there for over a decade. Craig, welcome to the show. Pleasure to have you on. How's it going?
Yeah, all good. Thanks for having me on.
So in a second, we're going to learn all about Switzerland and the team and what we can expect from them at the 2026 World Cup. But before we get officially cracking, we're just going to kick off with a segment that I like to call One Truth and One Lie. So what I'm going to do, Craig, is I'm going to present to you two seemingly crazy facts about Switzerland. One of them is 100% true. The other one I made up this morning. It's completely fake. And I just wanted you to decipher which is which. So I'll read out the two sentences and then you can have your best guess as to which is which. So sentence number one. Swiss tennis legend Roger Federer was actually a youth prospect for FC Basel, big team in Switzerland for those who don't know, and was offered a professional contract there, but he turned it down in order to focus on his tennis. Question number two, sentence number two. During a World Cup match in 1954, Switzerland's goalkeeper suffered severe sunstroke and spent the second half wandering around his penalty area in a trance, hallucinating, while a coach stood behind the goal shouting instructions to him. So, Craig, which is true? Did Roger Federer get offered a contract by FC Basel, or did a Swiss goalkeeper spend half of a World Cup match wandering around the penalty area in a trance? What do you reckon?
I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this one. When you started speaking about Roger Federer, I had some doubt because he is a Basel fan. He's been heavily involved in the club for a while. But I have read the story about the goalkeeper at the 1954 World Cup. But there's also a voice in the back of my head saying maybe that wasn't a true story that I read, but I'm pretty sure something like that did happen. So I think the truth is the goalkeeper story.
Well, as far as my research goes, that is absolutely correct. Yeah, Federer is a Basel fan, but never was in the academy. Yeah, so the player in question, I might butcher this pronunciation, Kurt Schmid. It was at the 1954 World Cup, the quarter-final between Switzerland and Austria. Switzerland were beaten 7-5, a game which remains the highest scoring game in World Cup history, as it happens. 40-degree heat he was wandering around in. This was a tournament held in Switzerland, which is crazy. You don't think of sort of Saudi Arabian temperatures to be in Switzerland, but there we go.
Just as a kind of side story to that, I attended the Women's Euros in Switzerland last summer, and it was the week before I arrived, it was like 35 degrees. And thankfully, by the time I got there, it was a wee bit less because, I mean, being Scottish, I would not have survived that. I barely survived as it was. So, yeah, I'm glad it wasn't anywhere near the 40 degrees of that. World Cup.
Heard it from the horse's mouth. Yeah, I'm a bit Scottish as well, myself, obviously the hair, but the pale skin, so I'd be the same as you, would not survive that. So Switzerland hosts, as we mentioned, of the aforementioned 1954 World Cup. They've never won the tournament, of course. I like to think of Switzerland as the sort of like mid-table team of the World Cup, usually getting out of the group, never really going very far in the knockouts. In fact, the last knockout game they won was way back in 1938 against Nazi Germany, of all teams. Just a little bit of a fact for you there. In 2006, they became the first team to ever be eliminated from a World Cup without conceding a single goal, losing to Ukraine on penalties in the last 16, where they also became the first team to fail to score a single penalty in a World Cup shootout. Two not particularly great records there. As for this summer, they'll be in Group B alongside hosts Canada, Qatar, and a yet-to-qualify European side, which could be Wales, Northern Ireland, or 4-time winners Italy. And winning that group could be hugely advantageous. It would set up a last 32 clash with a yet-to-be-determined third-placed side. Not all group winners face a third-place side, so that's a big plus for them. Win that game, and they're likely to face Cristiano Ronaldo's Portugal in the last 16, the side, lest we forget, who smashed them 6-1 at the same stage of the 2022 World Cup. And just briefly, before I move on, if they finish runners-up in the group, they'll face the runners-up of Group A, which could be, if they qualify, Ireland. So a couple of interesting permutations there. So before we properly get into the nitty-gritty about the 2026 World Cup, I just want to begin with a section I like to call the travel log. So, Craig, before we talk players and tactics and what we can expect from Switzerland, I just want to get a little bit more of a feel for the culture, the country, the history, the fans. Kick us off, Craig. Who is Switzerland's footballing GOAT?
You know, it was such a difficult question that I kind of had to make a list, because you know, if you go across the generations, there's probably, you know, a player from each generation that could be kind of put forward. You know, there's players like Max Abeglin, who he scored 6 goals at the 1924 Summer Olympics. Switzerland won a silver medal, which is technically their biggest achievement ever. Their kind of only sort of, you know, trophy, as it were. And they've had other players that I've got down here. You know, Stefan Chapuisat, who was the first Swiss player to win the Champions League with Dortmund. Other players, Josef Hügi, who was part of that 1954 World Cup squad. He scored a hat-trick in that game, that 7-5 game against Austria, the Battle of Lausanne in that heat, 40-degree heat. But I think, you know, more recently you need to look at players like Alex Frey. He's probably more well-known amongst kind of people like you and I of our generation. You know, he was probably the most natural goal scorer that Switzerland have had. And if he had been in the current team, I think, you know, he would have scored even more goals. You know, he was at part of the team at a time when Switzerland were doing okay, but not anywhere near the levels they are now. But again, I think once you move past those players, you get to the two obvious ones. You know, you've got Xherdan Shaqiri and Granit Xhaka. And Shaqiri, you know, he is a special player. He's obviously retired now. And there was always a kind of fear when he retired of how Switzerland would respond to that retirement. But then, of course, you've got Granit Xhaka there as well. But just on Shaqiri, you know, since his debut in 2010, he's something like 25% of the goals, at 272 goals that Switzerland have scored since his debut. He contributed a goal or assist, you know, and it was always him in the major tournaments. He scored in every major tournament since 2014, and some incredible goals, even the last Euros against Scotland, which was kind of a bittersweet for me. He scored a wonderful goal, even as a kind of bench player. He did start that game. I think it was the only game he started, and he scored an incredible goal to draw. So his goals and his ability to pull, you know, games out of the fire for Switzerland is unmatched. You know, in terms of actual, you know, flair and goal scoring ability, Shaqiri's up there. But for me, I think it has to be Granit Xhaka. His longevity in the team. He's captained the team now to back-to-back Euros quarterfinals. And just his mentality and the way he drives the team forward has been incredible, especially the last kind of 5-6 years or so. He's probably matured quite a lot, and he's really just, you know, he sets the standards for the team, as cliche as that is to say. And I think as well, one of the best kind of stories on Xhaka at the last Euros, when they played England, he was injured in that game. He said afterwards he couldn't strike the ball, he couldn't play long passes, but he was still outstanding. And the team took England all the way in that game. So he's just a player that, you know, you can always rely on. And I think, again, without him, Switzerland will be in trouble. You know, that conversation about what do they do when Shaqiri's gone is kind of transferred on to Xhaka. He's also now, of course, the first Swiss player since 1996 to be nominated for the Ballon d'Or as well. So he's just picking up the accolades, and the last 2 years of his career, especially at club level too, has just been outstanding. So I think he kind of takes that status now as the greatest player, and I think he'll be appreciated more when he's retired. Because in some regards he's still kind of splits opinion. If he has a bad game, there's a lot of players that kind of a lot of fans, that kind of, you know, jump on him. But he's a fantastic player, and he's always kind of delivered for the national team.
What is Switzerland's most celebrated football result? Why don't we kind of portion this as over the last sort of 10-20 years, what's the kind of result that Swiss fans might log onto YouTube to watch the highlights of if they need a bit of cheering up? What's that one game that's their most celebrated?
Well, there's only one answer. The game against France at Euro 2020. We've spoken before about Switzerland kind of being an early team, and for a long time they were. They lost out to Argentina at 2014 World Cup, Poland 2016, Sweden 2018. And those last two games especially were two games where you kind of expected them to at least, try and get past one of those similar level teams. And it didn't happen. And then they finished third in that Euros group to Wales on goal difference. And it paired them up with France. And all of a sudden you're thinking, well, it's not going to happen this time either. And of course, that game against France, they just delivered massively. And it was just the perfect storm. It was a roller coaster of a game. They went ahead, they deservedly led the game. Second half, they got a penalty for 2-0, missed the penalty. 4 minutes later, they were 2-1 down. And then Pogba scored an outrageous goal 15 minutes from time, did a stupid dance after it, and you think this is all falling apart, And then just the last 9 minutes of that game, Haris Seferovic scores, a player that very frustrating as a striker for the national team, but he delivered in that moment. And then Mario Gavranovic, another player who was not a consistent goal scorer, but delivered in that moment, and assist by Granit Xhaka as well for that equaliser. And then they go on and win the penalty shootout. Sommer saves from Mbappe, of all people, the final penalty. And it was just, I still remember fondly, even watching it home in Glasgow, it's like, we almost felt part of that togetherness of the country, because, Switzerland's a very kind of diverse country, different languages, all that sort of thing. But, it's just a party across the nation, and especially against a team like France, a much bigger neighbour that's always going to eclipse any achievement to, go and knock them out that early in a major tournament. And then, of course, get to the quarterfinals for the first time in a major tournament since 1954. It was just a spectacular and unexpected thing, and it's still held highly. And, I don't know if it will be beaten in terms of moments. And, of course, Switzerland can get further if they got to a semi-final or whatever. That would, of course, be amazing as well. But that is a standalone moment to, do that to France, who were the world champions at the time. It was an incredible evening for Swiss football, and I'll always be remembered.
Yeah, what a game that was. If Switzerland get knocked out, who's the one country that fans would absolutely hate to see lift the trophy?
Switzerland don't really have traditional rivals, but again, I think, someone like France, maybe Germany or even Austria, kind of neighbouring sort of countries or similar level countries. If they went on and won the tournament, then I think it would be annoying more than anything else. I don't think, it'd be a huge blow, because there's not a lot of rivalry there. But yeah, I think there's certain teams like France that you would rather did not win the trophy.
Plenty of Swiss players have had, successful careers in the Premier League, but often, not always, but often they can be quite divisive players. Granit Xhaka, Xherdan Shaqiri, we've already mentioned, Stefan Onsho, those sorts of players. Why do you think Swiss players have this kind of divisive reputation when they come to the Premier League? Is there something about the way that the kind of culture in Swiss football, or is this just one big coincidence?
I think slightly coincidental. I do think, in terms of Granit Xhaka, it's the passion that he shows, that it's kind of, he wears his heart on his sleeve. And I think he's been the most in terms of, he had that incident at Arsenal where he was booed off the park. But on the flip side, he turned that around dramatically, and he left kind of as a favourite of the fans, So, and then someone like Shaqiri, again, he probably spent too long at other teams. He was at Stoke City for a long time. If no disrespect to them, but you would feel he would have, played at a higher level for a bigger club than he did. But he still achieved such great things as well. But yeah, I don't really know why it is. Like I say, with Xhaka, he wears his heart on his sleeve, and he's definitely calmed down a lot, believe it or not. But he's someone that can definitely split opinion. We've seen that at Arsenal, but when everything's going well and he's at the top of his game, the fans buy into him and love him. So it goes both ways for me. You can have moments where he frustrates the life out of you, but again, he's just who he is, and you need to take every part of him as a player.
And to those watching, let us know in the comment who your favourite Swiss Premier League player was. We'd love to know. Let's get a bit of conversation going, shall we? We'll move on to the scouting report. So we'll just find out a little bit more about the players, the team, and what we can expect from Switzerland this summer. So just in terms of the British fans choosing in, who are tuning in, who are Brits going to recognise in Switzerland's squad this summer? Are there any Premier League players? Are there any ex-Premier League players that people remember? Who's in contention?
Well, of course, Granit Xhaka again at Sunderland. You've got Dan Doy, who plays at Nottingham Forest, that a lot of people might now know. Remo Freuler used to play for Nottingham Forest too. Manuel Akanji, of course, used to be at Man City. Zeki Amdouni, who's currently long-term injured just now. He might be back for the tournament. He's at Burnley, who, of course, might not be a Premier League team by the time that tournament comes around. But those are a few of those players. Other players, Breland Bowo, who's been around for a long time. He broke through at Basel at 16, and he's been around kind of in France, playing for a few clubs in France as well, and Germany. He scored at Wembley a few years ago in a friendly against England. But those are kind of the main players you might know. Ricardo Rodriguez has been around the team forever, playing in Italy for a long time as well, so you might know him. And Gregor Kobel, who plays for Dortmund and was in the Champions League final a couple of years ago too, so he's another player that might be well known. Alongside, of course, there's younger players. Fabian Rieder, he scored in the Champions League for young boys a few years ago at Old Trafford. He's playing in Germany as well just now, but he's still a young player that's probably not too high on the radar of many, but he's one that might be well known as well.
Yeah, just another one. Chelsea fans may remember Dennis Zakaria spent the season on loan there. I want to say 22, 23. I could have got that slightly wrong. But another player in contention. Just looking at the group then, Canada, Qatar, and then either Wales, Northern Ireland, Italy, or Bosnia and Herzegovina. How do you think Switzerland are going to get on?
The group is probably I don't want to say easiest, but compared to some of the groups they've had in the past, the last two World Cups, they had Brazil and Serbia in both groups. Cameroon were in there last time around as well. So they've had some really difficult groups. And this one, in comparison, they shouldn't really have as many problems. Canada as host nation is going to be tricky, but Qatar shouldn't pose many problems. Of course, having that third team that you don't know yet is tricky, but they've proven themselves against Italy before. They've played Wales before at the Euros, and Bosnia, I would like to think, wouldn't cause many problems. And of course, with the third place team probably going through, you would imagine that they would gain enough points to get through. So I'm not really worried about them getting out of the group. They have a great chance of topping the group, and I think that would be the expectation. But at the very least, they should have no issues, getting out of the group in one of those kind of free positions. I don't see them finishing bottom. That would be a disaster.
Is there going to be any element of complacency in the sense that Switzerland tend to operate best when they're the kind of, the dark horse where they're no one's expecting them to get a win and then they topple a giant? It is going into the group as kind of, okay, Switzerland are favourites to win. Is that going to hinder them a little bit? Or will they take confidence in that, do you think?
Well, it's funny you say about complacency, because a good example that the Euros qualifying, they were in the group with Romania, Israel, Andorra and Belarus, and that was their easiest qualifying group in a long time. There was no big hitters in there. Switzerland were the big team. Two teams go through, so even Romania as the kind of closest team, you would expect Switzerland to come through easily. And they started really well. They won the first 3 games, and then they only won one more game in their next 6 or 7, and it was against Andorra. They had this kind of habit of just conceding after 80 minutes every game and drawing a game. They were 3-1 down at home to Belarus at one point, came back in the last 5 minutes to draw it 3 each. They did the same thing against Israel, and then they lost to Romania in the last day away from home. So they went through in second, but they just kind of really, really struggled in that group. I don't know if it was a mentality thing. They just kept conceding after 80 minutes. It was kind of some of the most infuriating games that I've ever watched, because you knew you could see it coming every time, and it just kept happening. And of course they got through, and that brought a lot of worry about Murat Yakin, about the team ahead of the Euros. But then when the Euros came around, they switched on and they got to quarter-final and took England all the way. They beat Italy, of course, in the last 16. So in some ways, it's like, this team has the mentality to go and beat these big teams, but it is a worry that, that they only kind of switch it on when they have to. There was certainly times in that qualifying group where you felt like, this might not actually happen here. They might actually struggle and have to, miss out on the tournament. So yeah, it is a worry, but I do think that in such a small group, 3 games, the pressure is still on. You need to get it done in those 3 games, as opposed to, an 8-game qualifying group where you have multiple chances to kind of recover things. So I would like to think that they're going to be switched on and do what they have to do. There is that kind of seeded out in the back of my mind, but I have faith in the team at the major tournaments. They have done so since 2014. They've never put a foot wrong in terms of getting out of the group, which I don't think is spoken about enough for a team like Switzerland, that kind of mid-level team, maybe just outside the elite teams. There isn't really any other national side of the similar stature, even your Swedens or teams like that do it as consistently as Switzerland have. And even though there was that chat about them, kind of just getting out of the group and nothing more, even that in itself for such a long time was a wonderful achievement that I think a lot of people, including Swiss fans, take for granted, because there was a long period of time where tournament football wasn't even on the agenda.
Yeah, well, that kind of segues into the next question I'm going to ask. What would represent a good tournament for Switzerland? No knockout game win in the World Cup since 1938. Is it a case of just getting to the knockouts again, or are there aspirations to go even further, given the impeccable record of always getting out of the group they've had over the last 10 years or so?
I think in the context of the group, I think usually in the past, like those groups I mentioned with Brazil and Serbia, the aim was get out of the group, and see where it takes you. Getting out of the group, a tricky group, that's an achievement in itself. But in this group, I think, it has to be the aim to get out there and then progress further. If they finish top, they should get a favourable draw, which again, they can make the next step after that. So I think a good tournament would be advancing past the last 16. If they can do that, then of course it depends who they then draw after that. If they were to draw someone like Portugal, it would, there's again context there. And if they go out without embarrassing themselves like last time, then that's different. But as long as they get out of the group and, if they can come through a last 16 tie against a favourable opponent, then that would probably be success. Of course, there's expectation now after what they've done in the past, and they can match up to these big teams. So again, there'll be hope for more, but I think if they can progress beyond the last 16, then I think that will be seen as a success. Anything less than that, even going out in the group or, falling at the last 16, depending on opponent, would be pretty disappointing.
Who is Switzerland's talisman? Who's the guy they're going to be looking to this summer to lead them to glory, whatever that might look like? Again,
I go back to him all the time, but it has to be Granit Xhaka. He is the heartbeat of the team. He's the engine room in that team, pretty much. He is the captain for a reason. He's led the team to those 2 Euros quarterfinals, and without him, the team just doesn't tick like it usually does. You've got all the different parts around him, really exciting players, some goal scorers, Brailen Bolo, and you've got guys like Ndoye and Vargas who really, bring the attacking quality to the team. But, Xhaka just keeps everything ticking over. His range of passing, is just his intensity in the game, and the way that he plays and keeps the ball, his composure, all those sorts of things just keep Switzerland ticking over. And he's such a big absence when he's missing. He missed the game against Spain in the Euros when they lost on penalties after beating France. And again, Switzerland did well in the game, but he was missed massively in that game. He's just such a player that you can't really live without. So he is the player that Switzerland will look for. And again, it's probably going to be his last World Cup, so it's it'll be hoped that he can deliver again.
Big send-off for him. Is there a player in the squad who may not be known to UK fans who has the potential to kind of announce themselves at the World Cup, to have a really breakthrough campaign?
Yeah, the one that springs to mind for me is Johann Manzambi, who plays in Germany for Freiburg. Again, he wasn't even on my radar until last summer. I don't think I'd even heard the name. There's a few players in Switzerland in the Swiss leagues with a similar kind of surname, and originally I thought it was someone like one of those players, and then I read the full name, and I did not know about him. But he came into the squad for the summer friendlies last year against Mexico and USA, and he scored 3 goals and an assist in his first 8 caps. So he's really made an impact already. He's still only 20 years old. He's kind of mostly a bench player just now, but he's the sort of player that can come on and impact the game. He's doing well with Freiburg as well in the Bundesliga. So he's a player that I would like to think will make his mark. I don't think he will be a starter at the tournament either, but I do think he can come on and deliver for the team. And of course, Fabian Rieder, who I mentioned earlier, he is a player that, kind of seems odd to talk about him because he played at the last World Cup. He played against Brazil. He made his first start for Switzerland against Brazil at the World Cup as a 20-year-old, which, was to me at the time, it felt like a crazy decision by the manager, but he's someone that's kind of cemented his place in the side now. He's 22 now, and he'll just get better and better as well. So he's a player that I think at this tournament and tournaments going forward, he'll make his mark.
What would you say is Switzerland's biggest strength, and what would you say is their biggest weakness while we're on that subject?
I think biggest strength probably in midfield. We've got quality midfielders there, creative midfielders. Even attack wise, they are improving. There was a time when the attack was, you couldn't rely on the attacking players, but you've got players out wide like Ndoye and Vargas, even though Okafor, who hasn't been in the team as much, and Manzambi as well, who can really influence the game. So I think from midfield and attack, Switzerland have a lot of quality there. They can hurt teams, and there's a lot of cohesion there between that. This kind of a more settled area of the park now. I think defensively there's still issues there. It has got a bit better. There seems to be more structure and balance in the team, but I think defensively they've always conceded goals. Even every tournament they're always conceding goals. So I think that's the biggest issue for Switzerland. Even though it is quite a settled defence, that you've had Akanji in there for a long time. Rodriguez has been there forever. Sylvain Widmer as well, and Nico Elvedi. It's a kind of settled defence, but for whatever reason they do concede quite a lot of goals. So I think defensively they can be got at, but I'm more encouraged by the attack, and of course the goalkeeping position. Switzerland have always been blessed by good goalkeepers. Jan Sommer for such a long time. Gregor Kobel now. I think he's only got 8 caps, Kobel, and any other national team of Switzerland's level, he would have got so many more caps. But just because it was such a strong, because you had Sommer in there, even Roman Burki as well, and Diego Beneglio before that, it's always been a kind of strong position. So the goalkeeping position isn't a worry either. So I would just say conceding goals is an issue, but again, I'm more encouraged by the attacking displays that Switzerland have had, especially the last year since that summer, those summer friendlies against Mexico and USA. They've shown kind of more ruthlessness. There's more players chipping in with the goals as well. So whereas before, when I would be concerned that they weren't going to score enough goals in these games, that they're conceding a lot, they do seem to be scoring a lot more goals now, which is encouraging.
Tell me a little bit about manager Murat Yakin. So he, been in charge for a while now. You mentioned earlier he, masterminded those victories in the Euros over France, over Italy, almost over England as well. What is it? What has he done, and what is it about his setup that makes Switzerland so tricky, such a potential banana skin for these big teams?
He's such a kind of he splits opinion. As a manager, when he was appointed, he was managing in the second tier of Swiss football. So when it came to be that he was going to be the next manager, there was a lot of kind of confusion. This is a guy that had won titles at Basel and he managed in the Swiss Super League, but now he was in the second tier, a team kind of challenging for promotion, but not really, just kind of there or thereabouts. So to get that promotion to the national team while they're in such a period of success was an odd decision. But he quickly came in and he kind of made his mark. But again, then you had that qualifying campaign that I mentioned where they were conceding all the time and struggling, and there was calls for him to be sacked. Before the tournament, the Swiss FA had to come out and say, he's going to be the manager. And then, of course, he delivered against Italy, and he took England all the way as well. So he's someone that I feel like he is one bad result away from everyone being on his back again. Don't get me wrong. He's just one of those types of managers. He made a lot of decisions in the last Euros where he started. I think it was the last Euros or the last World Cup. He started a player, an uncapped player, who'd played like 15 minutes in a friendly beforehand, and he came on and he scored. He played in that game and he scored. So he makes decisions where you think, this is crazy. What is he doing? And then it comes off for him. So yeah, he's definitely one of those that splits opinion. But I think he's now fortunate that he's got a more balanced team. Like I was saying, there's players, you've got Dan Ndoye, Vargas out wide, and Mbolo through the middle, which is kind of how he now sets up. The midfield's strong as well, so he's got a lot of kind of creative outlets, whereas before he was kind of plugging gaps in the team. Even when he first came in, I remember the qualifying group for the Euros where Italy were in the group and they conceded 2 goals. His focus was just to kind of defend and try and hit on the counter. But now there's more fluidity about the team and they're more balanced. So I think that benefits him massively. And I think this is a massive kind of test for him that it seems to have all be coming together now for this tournament. So let's see if he can go one further now, if he can deliver even more on what he has done, because it seems like all the tools are in place for him.
I'm giving you the chance to turn one England player Swiss for this World Cup. Who are you picking and why?
It's a boring answer, but I have to say Harry Kane. I think, again, attack-wise, Switzerland have improved. They've got more options there, but again, there's probably going to be an over-reliance on someone like Mbolo to score the goals. And he hasn't always been consistent. It's only in the last year or two since he came back from his injuries that he's been scoring a lot of goals for Switzerland. But if you had someone like Harry Kane in there, then I think that would just kind of be the cherry on top of the cake for that team. And yeah, of course, I think any national team would like to have him in there. But if you could have him up top, then that would be nice. But I think it's just fantasy.
Yeah, again, to those tuning in, let us know which England player you'd pick to turn Swiss for the World Cup. Would you pick anyone different than Harry Kane? Do let us know. Okay, we're just going to wrap this episode up with a few quick fire questions that I'm going to throw your way. So just let me know whatever the first thing that comes to your mind or the most appropriate thing that comes to your mind, and we'll see how we get on. So, Craig, who is winning the World Cup?
I have to say Spain. I don't see any other team. I don't think any of the other teams are kind of at the level Spain have been at. There's teams that you've got strong teams in there, like France and all those teams have the players, Germany and stuff, but I just don't see anyone coming close to Spain. The goals in their team, the way they're playing. Again, it's a boring answer, but I just don't see anyone coming near them.
Where does Switzerland finish?
I'm going to say quarter-final. Again, I'd like to think they're going to top the group, get through the last 16, and then that's where my optimism always ends. If I don't see it going any further than that, there's been too much kind of heartbreak over the years to have more confidence in that. The 2 penalty shootouts in the Euros have taught me better than to believe too much. So, I'll go quarterfinals, and even that in itself would be a massive thing, especially to do that at the World Cup, the first time in such a long time.
Who's winning the Golden Ball? So that's the best player at the World Cup.
Granit Xhaka. No, probably Lamine Yamal, I would say. Again, he's someone that's...
Spain are winning it, then Lamine Yamal has a chance.
He was fantastic at the Euros and he's only getting better. So,
What about the Golden Boot?
See, this tricky one is it normally depends on the kind of level of group. I think England have a pretty favourable group, so I'll go Harry Kane. Otherwise, I would have maybe went for Mbappe, but I can't remember France's opponents too well, so I'll go for Kane.
And lastly, what do you think the Swiss public would prefer to see more? Roger Federer randomly coming out of retirement and winning Wimbledon again, or a Switzerland victory over Germany, let's say in the round of 16, if indeed that was possible, which I don't think it is.
That's a tricky one as well. I think Roger Federer is like the greatest sportsman of all time in Switzerland, so I think everybody would be happy to see that. But then at the same time, he's had his fair share of success, so I'd like to think maybe a one-off victory over Germany in the knockout rounds would take precedence over that. That's the one I would go for anyway.
And finally, what is your controversial / outrageous prediction for the 2026 World Cup? Doesn't have to be about Switzerland, but give us your brutal take or honest take.
Yeah, so I had a quick look at the groups beforehand, and I was trying to kind of see where I could see maybe a big nation struggle in the groups, but I feel like the groups are so easy to get out of. That might come back and backfire on me in regards to Switzerland, but they're so easy to get out of that I don't think any kind of big nations will fall. Maybe Netherlands, depending on who comes through in that playoff path. They've got a tricky group with Tunisia and Japan in there. They might struggle, but I do believe Japan will go quite far in the tournament. I think they've been quite impressive the last World Cup, and I think they did well in qualifying as well. They came through that easily. So, I think Japan will have a strong tournament. I don't know how deep they'll go, but I'd like to think maybe quarterfinals.
Interesting. Well, you heard it here first, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Craig. Really do appreciate your time. And that's it for our preview of Switzerland. Let us know in the comments how you think the Swiss will get on this summer. And join us next time for more stories, insights, and deep dives as our global scouting mission continues as we count down the days to the FIFA World Cup this summer. Until then, keep making football great again.